inviting Harsha de Silva, Member of Parliament, Colombo, Chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Public Finance. Harsha de Silva, I'll request if you can, please sir. And I'll invite my colleague, Siddhant, to please come over on the stage. Siddhant, please have the discussion with sir.
With me is someone who actually needs no introduction. He's quite popular both in Sri Lanka and in India. MP from Colombo, economist, wear several hats, including starting a service when it comes to ambulance service here in Sri Lanka. We'll talk all about that, but my first question to you is setting the stage in terms of India-Sri Lanka relationship. How do you see the relationship going forward? It looks like that this relationship is now possibly in its golden stage.
Well, you started with what we had done, this relationship. You talked about the ambulance. And I think it's an amazing people-to-people connection, because every ambulance is a gift from the people of India. Thank Prime Minister Modi. 10 years ago to July this year, when we had the first conversation, and we wanted to create something like what he did in Gujarat with 108 when he was Chief Minister. But today, this is an amazing service, the most loved service in Sri Lanka, and the most efficient public service currently. We run 28,000 kilometers a day. We take over 1,000 people to critical care, and runs fully with the backing of the government of Sri Lanka currently. Spend about 5 billion rupees a year. We had a nice chat when Mr. Nataraja Chandrasekharan was here last. He visited us, and you know, he's sending us another 50 brand new ambulances to join our fleet. We go from 325 to 375 and then to 500 with the support of the government of India later this year, hopefully. So it's a massive project. We never expected it to be this, but it has become what it is. So, because you mentioned. But what I wanted to talk about is what Mr. Gurmeet Chanda, am I pronouncing it right?
You're correct.
I want to pick up from what he said, because we talk about, you know, sort of rhetoric, you know, yes, we had this history, we want to do this, we want to do that, all good. But let's look at the 5 points he made. I thought it was very interesting. You know, it feels good when India is doing well. You know, if he came and stood here and said, you know, it's really bad, things are tough. But that's not what he said. He said things are moving fast, India is growing, and there is opportunity in India for Indians. But I think there is opportunity in India for Sri Lankans as well. You know, my friend Santosh, when he said, look, you know, let's think about opening India's doors to Sri Lanka duty-free. First time I heard it, I spoke to the Deputy High Commissioner, and I said to him, you know, it's an interesting idea. At the rate India is growing, at the rate India is producing things, you know, Sri Lanka's connection to India, I want to stop for a moment, go back a little while, and I want to come back, goes a long way. We talked about Buddhism. You know, it was Tapasubaluka, who were the first lay disciples of Buddha who came here, you know, 5 centuries before Christ. Okay, and from that point, the merchant banking, if you want to call it that, business of today, there's been so much of connection between these two countries. You know, long before the banks were created, you know, the commercial banks, the British banks, it was the Chettiars who did business in C Street, in Petta, and so on, right? And today we talk about the India-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement and so on. So in this context, he said energy, he said defense, he said UPI, he said contract manufacturing, and he added circular economy. I think we should touch on those, because he has, you know, he had data to suggest these were the areas that we could collaborate. Shall I just make some points or?
Continue, sir. In fact, his speech was watched and listened by everyone. I was listening carefully to that. But essentially, in terms of various elements you talked about, economic element, what should be the place in Sri Lanka or possibly in Colombo, where you are MP from, where Indian investors should come? Or the ease of doing business in Sri Lanka, where are the sectors?
No, I want to go broader. Let's look at energy. You know, what the gentleman said is, well, we have no problem in generation. We have enough generating capacity with solar and wind. Is that actually correct? Is it generation for the sake of generation, or is it generating at an efficient level? I mean, if you look at wind, the load factor, the capacity, say you have a 100 megawatt plant, and if you run it on average every day, how much can you produce? In Sri Lanka, it's about 40 to 45. So load factor is about 45. In India, it's about 20, 25. Maybe the new one's 30. So there's clearly an efficiency argument that can be made. And then he talked about, you know, sort of distribution and generation, transmission. You know, and we have been talking about the HDVC line, HVDC line for a long period of time, from Madurai to Anuradhapura, and also even the submarine cable that goes across the ports.
I think the West Asia crisis provide more focus and impetus to the fact that there should be an oil pipeline between the two countries, something that the UAE is also supporting.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, it goes beyond just the ability to generate, transmit, and distribute at scale with efficiency. I think that's where the opportunities lie. Because what's the point in Sri Lanka being able to produce 56 gigawatts of wind energy at this expected rate of efficiency if that cannot be consumed, right? So I think there is a lot more potential in that, and I won't dismiss the point he made. Not that I don't want to dismiss it totally, but I think there is so much more there than the top line says. Then in case of defense, he said defense, he talked about missiles, he talked about air superiority, all that is granted. But what about maritime security? What about the ocean? You know, the recent incident when you spoke to me in Delhi about Iris Dana.
The Dana incident, of course.
I mean, we can't just think about air superiority. You have to start thinking about the ocean, the freedom of navigation. And Sri Lanka is the center of the Indian Ocean, whether you like it or not. You know, and then we must be punching way above our weight class in order to ensure that we become a real partner in the region and the world as a security provider, as a partner in that exercise. And if you look at the recent purchase of Colombo Dockyard by Magazon, I forget the name, a large Indian naval shipbuilding company. That moved the majority ownership from Japan to India. And what do? They build warships, they build submarines. And so therefore, while you concentrate on that, there is a whole area of defense-related manufacturing, surveillance, services that Sri Lanka has to be a important partner. So if you think about it that way, there's so much more scope there as well.
So briefly, my last question to you is about how do you see the India-Sri Lanka relationship going forward? We know that we've already talked about the relationship, we pointed to the ambulance, the energy sector, but overall, what's your view? If we like to, many of our people who are sitting here would like to hear from you.
I mean, you shouldn't think of Sri Lanka as a foreign country, foreign land, because Lanka is in from Ramana trail. You know, Lanka is part of the Indian story, right? And we must think about this not as a agreement with some political official which you sign and then try to sort of improve upon, but rather a common approach, try to partner as opposed to having a business relationship, a partnership. So have always been promoting the integration of economics, particularly if you look at the South Indian growth story and the Sri Lankan possibilities in improving that. There is potential profits to be made both in India and in Sri Lanka. So it needs to be looked at in that context, in my view, right? So we talked about pipelines, we talked about ports, we talked about energy, we talked about UPI, we talked about the financing, right? And perhaps in the longer term, we can think about land connectivity as well down the road if there is scope for and sort of both countries' people want that to happen. So therefore, I think we are moving in the right direction. There is political will. People are happy to collaborate. It's a good story. It's a positive story. India is growing rapidly. And for us, that is certainly something that is critical to sort of leverage upon. So I think that's the way we need to look at it.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, sir, for giving us your perspective about India-Sri Lanka relationship, particularly focusing on energy, something that has been a big focus, especially in the aftermath of the West Asia War. But clearly, this is not only just a relationship, it is a civilizational relationship, and this is something that I think both sides cherish. Thank you so much, sir, on that note.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. I may request you to please be on stage for a while.
And I'd now like to invite, so we'll be taking questions a little later. Will please request us to move on. After this, I'd like to request Mr. Prasanna Raghav, Business Head, Innovation Studio, EVP Marketing for Z Media. Mr. De Silva, I request you to please be on stage with us, sir. Mr. Raghav, please come on stage. We'd now like to invite Dinesh Victor on stage. Sir, please come on stage. He's the founder and managing director, SIP Academy India. And we'd like to felicitate you the Lifetime Achievement Honor for promoting skill development. Mr. Dinesh Victor, requesting you to please come on stage. Sir, please. Would like to felicitate Mr. Victor. May we please have the memento? Yeah, there it is.
Can you please give a round of applause? Thank you so much once again. Thank you.
And we'd also like to have a memento for Mr. Harsha De Silva. Again, I'll request Mr. Raghav to please present the memento to Mr. De Silva. Absolute pleasure having you here with us at the summit, sir.
Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Round of applause, please.
Let's move forward.
All right, I'd now like to